Public School. We are very honored that Speaker Brian Blough is a 2011 graduate of MCNY's Master of Science in Education program. Brian is currently principal of PS 161, the Ponce de Leon School in the South Bronx. Brian also is an adjunct professor in our Master of Science in Education program, where he regularly teaches courses in diagnostic reading and in classroom management. Recently, PS 161 was chosen by the New York City Department of Education to host a new dyslexia pilot program to help address the needs of students in the South Bronx. We are honored that Brian is joining us, and we're honored as well for all of you for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Dr. Pissarro, and for supporting this event.
My pleasure.
It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Humphrey Crookendale, the college's Vice President for Academic Affairs. You're on mute, Vice President Crookendale.
Thank you so very much, David, and good afternoon to all of you. I want to join with the president in expressing my thanks and appreciation for Brian agreeing to have put on this very important presentation. And the things that the president won't say, I am not uncomfortable in saying. What a wonderful thing to have an alum of Metropolitan College in the School for Ed to be able to put on such an important discussion on an important subject matter. And it just speaks to the talent that we harness and we produce out of this little institution. And so I'm excited. I can't wait to hear and to see of the full dispensation of what Brian will present this afternoon. But I am pleased as a representative of Metropolitan College of New York to welcome all of you to this important discussion. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it back to David so that we can get the real substantive discussion on the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Crookendale, for your support as well and for your inspiring words. And I now invite to the podium Dr. Patrick Ianello, the director of the college's Master of Science in Education program.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned before, today's webinar is presented by MCNY's Purpose-Centered Master of Science in Education degree program. The program is approved by New York State for initial certifications in both childhood and special education in grades 1 to 6. Like the other accelerated MCNY graduate programs, the MSEd' program can be completed in just 3 or 4 semesters. As previously mentioned, Principal Blough graduated from the program back in 2011, where he completed, as part of Purpose in Education, constructed action projects that promote professional empowerment by linking real-world experience with the college coursework and relevant research in the field. After completing an additional master's degree in educational leadership in special education, he is now currently a doctoral student at Fordham University, where he is researching dyslexia, language-based disabilities, and the resources offered by schools that lead to student success. On September 8th of this year at PS 161, Mayor Adams himself and school's Chancellor Banks welcomed back students to school in the Bronx. As one of the 2 pilot schools that offer intense literacy instruction, Chancellor Banks said on that day that PS 161 will serve as a beacon and a blueprint for other schools the city plans to launch for struggling readers. I want to thank Principal Blough for his presentation now, entitled Constructive Action in Elementary Education, Addressing Dyslexia in a Bronx Public School. Principal Blough?
Thanks, Dr. Arnello. Thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome. I am indeed a proud MCNY graduate, and I'm proud to be still working with the school and working with the students. I've been a principal. This is my 8th year, and the 3rd school that I've been on the leadership teams for, and I'm proud to also have student teachers from the program in my buildings, and very proud to even hire, even currently, very recently, I hired a graduate to spearhead one of our initiatives and programs at the school. So very proud to be here. I'm excited. I see a lot of students and former students as in the participant group. Always excited to see them. I'm definitely the type of professor and just educator. We need to make a big network and share resources and just continue the work however we can to get our students there. So I will definitely always keep in contact with any of the students that I've had. So it's great to see you here. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Dr. Arnello, I can still see you. So if you can give me a thumbs up if the screen share works out and we're all in good shape, and we'll get started. All right, going full screen. It should just take a second to load. Still good? All right. Okay. So my purpose and my why. I'm a father of 3. One of my children has an IEP and a language-based disability herself. I'm a special education teacher at heart, and I always will be, regardless of other titles and roles. I'm always looking to problem solve in that area. I'm a public school principal in the South Bronx at PS 161. I am actually here in the building now, so there is after school going on. So if you hear any school noises, that's just par for the course. I'm an adjunct at MCNY and a graduate, like we've said. Currently a doctoral student researching language-based disabilities and dyslexia and the resources needed. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. And just by nature, I'm a problem solver. One of the reasons I am a parent of 3 is we researched, my wife and I, that there are hundreds of thousands of students in the United States that don't have homes that are part of the foster system. And so that's how we welcomed our 3rd child into our family. And it was just sort of a kismet situation where she has needs that fit even the research that I'm doing, and she's progressing as well. My core beliefs: all children can learn and be successful. There's no such thing as a bad kid. Issues arise in all of us, in all humans, when a need is not being met. And we'll talk about how the program, the pilot program in my school, is really meeting some behavioral needs of students that have these issues. I truly believe that education post-pandemic needs to look different, in the United States especially. And students are often underestimated, and we need to have accessible but really high expectations for our students and meet their needs. So just some facts about dyslexia. I know it's very known, and I know as an educator it's very known and out there, but there's still so much, even those of us in special education and other fields, that you hear about it, but you don't know enough really about it, and definitely not enough in the past has been done to address it. And so just some facts: 2/3 of students who cannot read proficiently by the end of 4th grade will end up in jail or on welfare. The 4th grade year is the watershed year. We can predict that if a child is not reading proficiently in 4th grade, he or she will have approximately a 78% chance of not catching up. To me and to a lot of others, and it's definitely said more now, that this is our biggest social justice issue. If we really want to change just the landscape of our nation and those in need, we really need to get everyone reading. It can be a gateway to a lot of desperate situations if you're not able to read, if you're not able to even fill out and complete a resume or a job application. So to continue, 85% of all juveniles who interface with the juvenile court system are functionally low literate. Students who drop out of high school are 5 times more likely than high school graduates to be arrested in their lifetime. And students who drop out of high school are 63% more likely to be incarcerated than their peers with 4-year college degrees. So this issue of literacy directly is the schools to prison pipeline issue. And it's something that we need to address, and starting with making pilots in schools that directly address the issue of dyslexia and illiteracy is part of the, it's a step in the right direction to the solution. I clicked on the link, hang on one second. Is that, okay, you can still see my screen? So how this program came about, I'll talk, hang on, bear with me. There we go. So a few years back, a group called the Literacy Academy Collective formed, and it is a group of mothers that have children that were diagnosed with dyslexia. They met through different channels and avenues and varying careers, but they got together and formed this group, which I can share the link to their website, or if you Google Literacy Academy Collective, they're the first that comes up. But they are one of the groups that were pushing for a new school through the new school initiatives. And it was, again, right timing with the right mayor and the right chancellor, Mayor Adams, who, as Dr. Anello said, did the first day at our school, is a child that grew up with dyslexia. And obviously he's achieved all that he's achieved, but it was hard. And he's very upfront about his struggles throughout his life with dyslexia. And dyslexia often comes with other issues, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. But the Literacy Academy Collective, who I'll show just a little video clip from a documentary that's being created about them, is a piloting to have a school, a standalone school in the borough of the Bronx. The mayor and the chancellor have an initiative where they want to have screening in all the schools, which they've started screening in a lot of the schools. And then there's 2 pilot schools, as was mentioned, one in Harlem and then us. And then within the next few years, they want to have 1 hub school in each borough that can screen and address these needs. So why us? I really commended the mayor and the chancellor, and also the advocacy groups that are starting these schools, because they could have picked an easier neighborhood. Where we are in District 7 in the South Bronx is historically one of the toughest neighborhoods for a lot of different things. Highest obesity rates, highest rates of asthma, some of the highest rates of poverty, some of the lowest resources. It's a food desert. Attendance is historically low. Performance is historically low. But it's the area of the most need. So I really commend, anybody that wants to work in some of the neighborhoods that are often neglected and really try to push these resources in. So it's fantastic that they're here. So they chose District 7. Our superintendent was excited about the initiative. And then they talked to different principals, and I may say yes type of a principal. I think that we need to look at things differently. And I'm also very flexible, where I was willing to say, if this is going to work for kids, and I looked at the research, that we'll make this happen. And I had a really good just meeting and fit with this group. And so that's how the pilot, that's how we were chosen. We started the work in the spring. We teamed up and hired teachers. And as it was a tough end of the year, because as the school year winds down, which if you're in schools or a principal, you always want more days at the end of the year because there's so much to do. So we're winding one school year down and trying to create a school at the same time. So we did all of our hiring. And then over the summer, the teachers had a very intense practicum, which they taught for 2 hours, and then they would train for 2 to 3 hours every day in our summer program and summarizing. So I'm going to stop my screen share because I'm going to play a short video clip of the Literacy Academy Collective. So I won't play the entire thing, but I do want to give a sense of this group. And this is one of the pluses and minuses. I'll talk in a minute about the need for limiting any distraction with students with language-based disabilities and dyslexia. And piloting a school like this can create a lot of distraction. There is a constant desire for reporters to come in, observe the class, film the class. There's a documentary film crew that has been filming this group in their journey to start a school for the past couple of years. And so it's a balancing act to give the group and the program the support and attention it needs, but also limit the distraction for the students and the teachers. So I'm going to play a little clip now, it's a little teaser trailer for the documentary about the program.
It is a crisis hidden in plain sight.
The reading gap among school children in this country is disturbing. What happens to the millions of children struggling with words?
There's an undeniable connection between literacy and incarceration.
We found that over 50% have dyslexia.
Over 50%.
Our plan is incarceration, and that is what angers me.
You know, with Lucas, he's always struggled. You have a bag right there. Make sure you have everything. I'll give you my laptop. He was like, I hate school. I don't want to be there. Why do I have to be there? I would just watch him in class and he's completely lost. Completely lost. You want to take a bus or you want to walk? That's what sort of starts the low self-esteem. That's what starts triggering all the feelings of like not feeling that you are learning like your peers, feeling like you're dumb. He'll say multiple times, like, I have a small brain, I don't understand that. Everybody is hell out. It was heartbreaking because he's a really brilliant kid.
As a dyslexic, you can be very bright and yet read slowly. So these are smart individuals. The problem is, while they're in school, it's the weakness, the slow reading, the poor spelling that sort of comes out at you.
Get on. He's super creative. You know, oftentimes these kids are not academically strong, but are creative beyond belief. This kid can draw his little heart out.
Dyslexics think differently. They are intuitive and excel at problem solving. They feast on visualizing, abstract thinking, and thinking out of the box.
The list is as long as your arm of people who have had massive impact in the world, all who were dyslexic.
We're curious, we're creative, we can simplify things, we see the big picture.
This is not a fault. You have a superpower.
Those with dyslexia or ones who struggle reading, it's a whole different ballgame. We know that particularly for African Americans or Black and Brown students, they have a heavier load to carry around in terms of how they are seen. We know that they're 3 to 5 more times likely to be identified as having a behavioral issue than their white counterparts. So you have to ask, like, why is that? To tell a first grader that they have a behavior issue and then they hear that the entire trajectory of their academic career, you feel hopeless. Like you don't want to go to school. You know, you make excuses that sets them up to get caught up in the legal system. And as we know, once you're in, it's hard to get out. And then you have, another number they give you, but it's not a student ID number. It's a prison ID number.
The school psychologist sort of told me that was just crazy, that I was overreacting just because my older son is dyslexic doesn't mean that he's dyslexic. I realized if I didn't do anything and intervene now, it wasn't going to help him. probably close to 9. I decided, you know, I'm gonna have to do my due diligence and start reviewing what other options there are out there for me, because the public school system is not it. If I leave him in the public school system, I will lose him.
Okay. So I put, and that mother that was just speaking is part of the Literacy Academy Collective. She's one of the mothers that that started this movement, and she is one of the more vocal and just she speaks a lot on this, and she's fantastic. She's really got amazing energy to her and is relentless in pushing for this. And so she didn't find something in the public school system and wanted to change that. And that's what can be said about a lot of the founders of this program. I put both the link to the Literacy Academy Collective, which is the organization, and then the link to that trailer for the documentary. All right. Now I'm going to go back to this presentation. So we need to do things differently. Clearly, it is a absolutely important challenge, and it's absolutely crucial that we address the literacy needs. I just wanted to show a couple pictures, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the pieces of the program and what works, and I'll leave it at that. But you can see one of the things about the program is it's small groups. We know that there's not a lot of silver bullets in education, but one of them is teacher to student ratio. So we know that the smaller groups are effective. I just want you to kind of take note, and we'll talk about it in a second, but you can see the alphabet behind the students. There's a couple letters missing, and that's very deliberate. And if you haven't yet covered a subject in, or not a subject, but a topic in the program, you don't see it yet. And I'll talk about that in a second. This is dictation, and I think this video will play natively. It's only about 8 seconds. Take a look. So the classroom doesn't look like classrooms that in 2022 we're necessarily used to. And it's not something, when I teach the classroom management course, it goes against most of the things that I teach my students about setting up their physical space. We want students to be as collaborative as possible. We just know that works. And we know students learn more from each other, and there's different groupings and stations and things that you can do. We also know that classrooms wouldn't be bare or sterile. We want to plaster them with anchor charts, with photos, with posters, with things that the kids love. But going hand in hand with language-based disabilities and dyslexia is lack of, typically, and in many cases, is things like ADHD, lower executive functioning, and we'll talk about some of those in just a second. But you really want to limit distractions. So I am actually in one of the pilot rooms right now. You can see that when we think of typical classrooms, all that is really up on the walls are pieces that are absolutely necessary for learning. This is where the students are as far as letters of the alphabet and words that they've known. The desks are in rows, which we typically only use in testing environments for general ed students and ICT students. You can see in the photo and on my desk here, there's a red line on the desk, and the students know that that's where their pencil goes. So everything is thought out and very deliberate in both the two pilot classrooms. And this is to limit distraction. It's brain research that led to a lot of these choices, and it led to the curriculum choices as well. So some of the pieces of the program. It definitely would not take place without a really strong partnership. During this year, the pilot is under my care. There is a facilitator and like a director of the program, but it's our budget, it's our teachers to make this work. So we have a really strong partnership to be a pilot in a co-located school. It consists of 2 classrooms. There's 3 teachers per classroom. So 2 teachers from each room will continue on with the LAC school, the Bronx Literacy Academy Collective. And then 2 of the teachers were already teachers of mine. So they're teachers that I know and trust, and we're excited to learn how to stop this. Back when I was a special education teacher and still had hair, I would pull it out, not being able to reach some students and get them to read. And there's a lot of roadblocks to that, and that I'll talk about in just a minute as well. But it's 2 classrooms, 3 teachers per classroom. So with 31 students, there is really around a 5-to-1 student to teacher ratio. That is fantastic and has all types of built-in benefits, because a lot of the students involved have historically had behavior issues in school, and other needs too. It's very explicit instruction. As you can see, with just even that 7 or 8 second clip, everything's very deliberate, everything's very explicit. Materials and training for much of it are from the Windward Institute, which is a private school that, you know, affluent families with these issues would, you know, pay, and their children would be able to go, but it's not accessible, especially to students in our neighborhood here. And so the Windward Institute, I feel like, is really kind of giving back and paying, you know, forward and sharing what works. Preventing academic failure, PAF resources are also used. And they're also teaching the students a lot about executive functions, which we'll talk about in just a second also. How is it so different and why? So like I just shared with the classroom, distractions are eliminated as much as possible. Teachers have frequent high quality professional development. They're working incredibly hard. With 3 teachers to a classroom, you might think that you may get to, oh, take it easy or rely on someone else, or it's less to grade. They are constantly assessing. They're walking around with clipboards. They know every minute of every student's day and how the students are reacting to it. They know when students need a brain break. Their preps, which in public schools, you want to make sure you're hitting all your minutes with your preps and giving teachers the breaks that they need. They do have some additional preps. They're all trainings. And so the teachers are really working hard. It was not easy, or it was not hard to find teachers that wanted to be involved in the program, teachers that really want to be on the forefront of founding teachers in a program like this, really applied. So we had a really good pool. Mastery and literacy concept is achieved before moving on. So as with learning letters in the alphabet, students are frequently assessed and they don't move on until they've achieved mastery. And so if you're in a group of 5 or 6, 3 of the students are ready to move on. The cycles are short. Those students will move on to another group. The other students that have not yet achieved mastery, and that will remain. We do mix the 2 classrooms. So 2nd and 3rd during the literacy block. If you're in 3rd grade, but are reading, or have made it to this point, not quite reading, but made it to, this certain level, students from the 2nd grade are mixed in that are on that same level. So students are homogeneously grouped in that way. It works because of the high student or teacher to student ratio. A priority focus on executive functioning, which we'll talk about a little bit of the executive functioning pieces next. In this program, intervention is the core instruction, and it's the entire day. Students are grouped based on mastery and need, and data is constantly and consistently reflected in the groupings. So executive functions, inhibitory control, that trips me up every single time. Working memory and cognitive flexibility. And so I'll talk about those. Your inhibitory controls is really your impulse control. It's your self-discipline. It is what enables us to not elbow the person next to us, just if we get the feeling to, and to keep our focus. Working memory. Working memory is the small amount of information that can be held in your mind and used to execute cognitive tasks. It's in contrast with long-term memory. I always think of short-term memory as RAM, like on your laptop. If you're getting the rainbow wheel, it's maybe because you're asking a little too, for it to hold a little too many functions in place. But our working memory is just right there, what we take in and what we're doing in the moment. Cognitive flexibility. It's the ability for us to adapt our behavior and thinking in response to the environment. When children are asked to think about multiple concepts simultaneously or change their approach to solving a problem, they need to demonstrate flexible thinking. So if we're adapting to a situation, and if we're creatively thinking about how to solve a problem, these things are necessary, and we need to address them with students with language-based disabilities. I'm going to stop this share. And I don't know if there's any hands up. I cannot see them, but I don't think there are. So now I want us to hear from a teacher that's teaching in the program. And this is a teacher, a veteran teacher. She's taught in the school for many years, even before I got here. Know her very, very well and trust her. And she's been teaching in this program. And so we'll hear from her now.
All right, so how's it going with the kids?
How's it going with the kids? So it's going great. I would say this to anyone who is willing and wants it, and who's willing to hear it, and who's curious about it. How are the kids doing? The kids are doing exactly what we had planned and anticipated for them to do, and they are reading. A lot of the kids that I have in my group, I looped with them. I had them in 2nd grade, and now I have them in 3rd grade. And I had at least 3 or 4 kids that were non-readers. They were not reading. No matter what I did, no matter how many times I tried to differentiate my phonics lesson, how many times I tried to pull them in the back for a more targeted instruction, maybe focusing on certain phonics parts, it just was not sticking. And now that they transitioned into the LAC program, they're going from CVC, where it's to full-blown chapter books, where we're working on compounds and digraphs and longer sentence structures. And not only are they reading it, but they're understanding what they're reading.
I was just going to ask you, the former special education teacher, but why? Why do you think that is?
I think that it's happening. Wow, why is that? Well, for years I've been trying to teach. For years I thought that I was teaching reading, and I didn't know really what it was to teach reading until I started teaching explicit targeted instruction. And I think that's what's making a whole lot of a difference for these kids. It's very systematic. It's very procedural. We're not jumping from one skill to the next. Everything has its purpose and its time and its level. So whatever the child sees in the dictation part, or in the, what we would say like the phonics part of the lesson, the first 45 minutes, they're going to see that in the corresponding reader that it comes with. They'll never get new information that they have not been exposed to. So like an example would be today. Today I was teaching the digraph CH, and we practice skywriting it, we practice saying it, we practice building it, we read it together, we read it apart, we broke it apart. And after doing all of that, you know, the multisensory part of it, I hear it, I see it, I write it. We did that for about 45 minutes. We then went into a reader, and they saw for the very first time, CH. They saw the digraph and they read it fluently. There was very little pausing when it came to words that had that digraph, whether it was at the beginning or at the end. But they would not have seen that beforehand. They will only see it now because the level they were ready for that level right now. And I think that makes just a whole lot of a difference. It's like direct, explicit instruction, very systematic, very purposeful, and then carrying that over into the reading part of it. There was something I wanted to say about it, that also it's not just like following the levels as it is, but the ongoing data that we collect, that is such a big deal as to like how we teach the next lesson. I can never go home and plan like 5 lessons from Monday to Friday the next week. I have to wait to see what are the kids producing for me, what errors are they making, and then like implement that into the next lesson the following day, not like next week. Like it has to be like the next day. And all of that is getting them to read, and not just read, but understand what they're reading.
What does the data collection look like? Is it like clipboard, kid's name, how they're responding to each piece?
So on the clipboard, you have what we would say our lesson guide, broken down into the dictation part and then into the reading part. And on the next page, some teachers like to actually have, if it's like the dictation part, they like to have their own dictation piece already written out on the skywriting paper itself. So again, today was CH. So if I was going to dictate CH 3 times to the kids, I already had written it CH, CH, CH. And then if they were now going to write chop and chip, then I wrote chip and chop. And then if I was going to give them a sentence, Al likes to chop, then I would write Alex to chop. And then I have it there. This is their finishing product. So then as I'm going around and I'm watching to see, are they keeping the CH together? Are they remembering the red word, which is like a sight word? If they're not, or if they are, I can put a little note on my own dictation paper itself with their initials on it, and then circle the part that we need to review again. Some teachers like to actually write it on the lesson itself in its own portion with the child's initial, the child's initial, the error that they made with a slash, and then with the correction, what it should have been. A lot of times we see a lot of vowel mix-ups. So instead of chip, I might see chop, and I would circle the I and underline the O and say, okay, we got to go over the I and the O vowel. And so everyone has their own way of collecting the data, as long as you're collecting it and it works for you and you're able to then read what you did. Some kind, analyze it somehow, it works.
All right. Rachel was going to join us, but she had a parenting conflict, which we can all understand. But she's fantastic, and they don't stop working. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces in this is you have to find the staff that's relentless. And so if you're a teacher in this program, and I've met many of you that are just relentless in that, but it's just really exciting. Rachel's teared up, and many of us have when we see the students progressing, just because we've had students in our care as teachers and special education teachers that we struggled to reach and to get them there. And you really feel like you're failing the student. And look at the statistics. If we don't get them on grade level by 4th grade, the futures, for students to catch up and to get on track get bleaker and bleaker. And so it is a punch to the gut to think about all the students that if we had some of these opportunities to do what we're doing now, when we had the children back then and as students, and it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow, but you can only just keep pressing forward. Let me get back to presentation here. And Tina or anyone else in the panel, just please let me know if there's questions that I need to address as we go into the different sections. Before I even share my screen, speaking of that, and one of the biggest things I've noticed, so 31 students, most of them were students, a couple of them came to the school this year, but most of them were students in our care last year for me, and then many of them have been in the school since pre-K and kindergarten. But they struggled, clearly they've gotten to second and third grade without being readers, and they've gotten interventions, and they've had many adults, working with them, but their struggles, things weren't reaching them in a conventional way, which would cause their behaviors to be out of control. And like I said, there's a lot of parity between ADHD and some other neurological disorders and dyslexia. And so you have students that are having trouble behaviorally, you have students that are having trouble sitting still, and all they're used to in school is getting redirected to sit still and also feeling like they're failing. They look around and see their peers learning how to do this thing, this reading thing that they see everywhere, and now it permeates their entire day. And so imagine as an adult going to your job day in and day out every day and seeing your coworkers and peers succeed and learn new things and do all of these things, and you just constantly feel like a failure. Your grades reflect that you're not successful. You can't do what your peers do. Things on the walls that are everywhere are a language that you don't understand. And so the kids were behavioral, they had behavioral issues last year. They had social emotional issues last year. They were sad, they were frustrated. And just we're only into December, but it was earlier on in October and November that I just noticed a change in the way the kids carried themselves. And to have the students say, I'm good at school now, I can do this. And to have the year for them feel successful. And it's because in a normal school day, you're kind of rushed through curriculum in a way if you're not picking it up in a normal pace. And previously they were feeling the failures, whereas this program is so deliberate and so small and so chunked, they're getting successes and small victories and small wins every single day. And just the mindset shift of, oh, I can do school now. I'm in a room where me and my peers, I can feel confident because we're all kind of learning this together and we're at the same pace. And so it's been profound, and that's been the biggest thing. They're all readers now, which I'll talk about in a second, but every one of them is reading, experiencing some sort of success. And one of the funniest things is we have a student that always had struggled, huge personality, but very, very social, but always, obviously has gotten to this point without reading and got caught passing a note. And it was an inappropriate note. But the fact that he had never written before, he literally has just learned how to write and how to write words and sound words out. The fact that he even wrote a note to a peer and is doing things that a typical student his age that can read and write is doing by passing and sounding out words, appropriate or inappropriate. It was just a win for everyone, the fact that he was interacting in this way. And the puzzle has been unlocked and the code has been cracked for him to be able to start to sound words out.
Excuse me, Principal Blough.
Yes.
We do have a question in the chat. Jennifer Ayala Calderon asks, could you possibly talk about how a parent can get their child evaluated for dyslexia or signs that you should seek an evaluation?
Sure. If the signs, I know can be that frustration. Some of the signs that I remember learning about dyslexia when Theo was diagnosed with it on the Cosby Show years and years ago, and they were talking about how B's and D's are switched and things like that. Those things are, can be an indicator, but there's others. So we always say here, and I've learned from the collaborative that, dyslexia is a clinical diagnosis, and that's why the students in these pilot programs are considered to either have dyslexia or a language-based disability, because a lot of things can contribute to that. It can be neurological disorder and indicators from dyslexia, and it can also be curriculum failures, educational failures, language issues, and other disabilities. But there has not been a good screener available for schools until this year. And there was, I believe, 180, and I can get back to you on the research with that when this information goes out, schools that were chosen to do and pilot some screeners. There's not, other than taking your child to, make an appointment for a psychological examination in schools, there was not that piece available. Hopefully by next year, which doesn't solve an immediate problem for a student that you have at home, there will be screeners in every school, and this will be something that's screened. The way that we screen for the children to join the program was we used Acadian's data, which is one of the standard assessments that all students in a large number of schools take. All the District 7 schools use Acadian's, which is a reading assessment. And if there was showing no progress the past handful of years, and they really weren't readers, they were just in an emergent category, and FNP testing already and the data strength triangulated, then they did one-on-one assessments with the LAC team. Those were all done by the LAC members, and these assessments for this particular program, because this will be a Department of Education school as they go through the process of being approved. And so those specific assessments are being created. However, Jennifer in particular is a student this session, so we'll actually be in the diagnostics of literacy course looking at some of the assessments before the term is over. They won't be publicly available, most likely, for those of you that are curious for a child at home. So right now, the clinical diagnosis is still with outside of school psychologists. But I got you, Jennifer. We'll talk. And thank you for that. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Like I said, a few of the things that I've learned so far, every student is reading. What took for this to catch up? As I said, students are writing and interacting in ways previously not possible for them. And then the happiness and well-being is one of the biggest and most important and tangible noticings. Students are expressing being good at school. The teachers deliberately have brain breaks, wiggle breaks, and different breaks for the students. Students can sometimes stand at their desks. We asked and inquired if students need flexible seating, but they were really trying to rigidly keep two classrooms as a mirror image of each other, and to have the seats and everything all very standard and all very much the same, and to keep a more static environment. I will say, as a principal and as a teacher, the room felt really cold when it was created and got set up over the summer. And when students are in it, you can see them thrive by having such limited distractions. So why isn't this everywhere? And why haven't we been doing it? And what's holding it back from working? One of the things that is tough, looking at data from private schools that address dyslexia and language-based disorders, attendance is fantastic, because the neighborhoods that it's there from, families maybe both parents don't have to work. They can drop the students off. There's just a lot less of some of those logistical issues that we have in the neighborhood. And so there is a few students out of the 30 that miss school frequently and also don't get to school on time. And that's tough. If you are a child that is frequently getting to school late, in elementary school, that's a family and parental issue that we try everything to address, and we try to get the resources needed. But if your student is getting to school at 9 o'clock frequently every day, they're missing literacy. And if you have literacy issues and you're not getting to school until after the literacy block, there's going to be challenges just embedded in that. Standardized expectations. We are still beholden to these standard assessments and the state tests that we have to take every year. Those create a pacing calendar and a certain set of standards per our curriculum that we need to cover, which is very difficult when you need to master certain skills to read first. One of the reporters had asked us, why don't you think this should just be something that's everywhere? A, not every student needs it. And B, we don't have that luxury of time. I know as a special education teacher, I would pick up students. I had a large caseload and I would pick up a small group of students and take them back to my resource room, classroom, and I would have my 45 minutes to fit in as much instruction as I possibly could. Manipulatives, think outside the box, being creative, but then I would take them back and they would have to hold on to that information until the next day. In this situation, it's a longer literacy block and they can really reinforce throughout the day the different things that the students did. They're still, beholden and required to teach them all the subjects. They're still having science lessons, social studies lessons, and those other pieces, but the students really go through mastery before they move on in literacy. And it's just necessary to do this. If not now, when? If we're not saying time out to a student's educational life and saying like, we're gonna address this now. No matter what, none of the other things are really important right now unless you learn how to read. And we just don't have that luxury in schools anywhere really to say, hey, this 10%, this group of kids need us to say, all right, no more, we're gonna address the reading issues. Everyone else can kind of go on and do their thing, but right now we're gonna take a time out and do everything that we can to teach the students how to read. Funding is a hang up because of student-teacher ratios. Schools' budgets are created by how many students they have in front of them. And if you really want, if you look at funding models for schools, if you really want to think about having groups this small with this many teachers, the money's not going to end up adding up. And so that's something that hopefully through these pilot programs that the Department of Education will be able to address. We know the funding's there to solve these problems. And if we don't, we know where the funding goes. The funding goes to prison populations and poverty and other things. So we need to address this now and shift the money into education to make those pieces happen. Screening, like Jennifer just asked in the chat, we need to really find the correct screening tool, which I'm confident, I believe it's January that this is supposed to be out and ready for us to see for this program for the next round. They were using pieces of other things that already exist, but you really need to make it fit for schools to all be able to screen in this way. And then training and the time to make this happen. Time for the kids, time for the teachers. I'll be fortunate, at least while I have, while I'm here and I have these two teachers that have gone through this process, they're going to remain and we're going to have this capability in our school, at least however it looks. If it's an intervention program, if it's, whatever it is to where the buck can stop with us and the students, at least within our school, will put through this program. Any other questions?
We do have some questions in the chat, and I thought rather than me voice them, I would invite our attendees to talk. So I'm first going to invite Jacqueline Ray to turn on her microphone and raise her questions to you.
Hello, Professor.
Hi, Jacqueline.
Okay, so the progress you mentioned, was it gained since the program began in September?
Say that one more time. What was
the progress you mentioned? Was it gained since the program began in September?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep,
and I did have one other question, and that is, what plans are in place for the students that no longer need the explicit instructions? Will they be transferred to another classroom? And how will that go? Are you going to wait until the end of the year? Will it be, if the child is ready in 6 months, will they be transferred to a regular classroom? So that was my two questions.
Both very good questions. Yeah, the students are now all readers. They haven't been readers in their entire career up until 2nd, 3rd grade. They've only been in the program since September, and they're all reading and writing. which is incredibly exciting. And so because there's 6 teachers involved and only 30 students, the students will not be moved back into the general or even an ICT room this year. They'll keep working towards grade level proficiency. And we'll have one of the teachers will have a more advanced group, and each, and tiered down within each of the 6 teachers. If the students for some reason instantly got to the point where they're gone from non-readers clear to grade level sooner than that, then we would look at what that would look like to integrate them back into the classrooms for sure. And they're a group that has been, their academic career before this year in ICT classrooms. And so it would be what I would think a smoother transition socially for them than if this was what they've known prior, or sometimes if a student is as homeschooled, it's a different transition socially into the groups, but I think they would do pretty well. And then they do go to lunch, some of their clusters and specials classes and some other things. And so, they do see and interact with their peers that are in different classrooms. But if a student gets to the point where they're on grade level, then we would look at going ahead and integrating them back as soon as possible. It's a program where you don't want to hold anyone back, and that's why they're constantly assessed and they move on as they're ready and then regrouped. So, yep. And so the idea next year is, hopefully those top tier groups would get transitioned. One of the ways that we can do that too is by continuing intervention support through a resource room or a pull-out type situation with the same methods on their level. And then that would just be a portion of their day. But thank you. Both great questions.
And I saw Professor Heidi Hulwadi wanted to ask a question, so I'm going to ask her to turn on her microphone.
Good evening, Professor Blough. It's a pleasure to see you in action there in your classroom. My question to you is, generally speaking, are there any particular parts of the brain that are specifically associated with dyslexia? Have you explored that part of the brain-based research?
Yeah, well, I'm just starting to, and that's a good science question from a scientist. But I'm gonna have to say that I can provide the research because I've just been with the doctoral research I'm doing, I've just been getting into the neurological, like the brain side of it, and I will definitely not give the most accurate information. So I'm gonna hold myself back and say that yes, and I can provide it. But there is a lot of it is that this is paired with a lot of other kind of neurological things, and where your working memory is stored, and those things are a big one. When I just would remember as a special education teacher when I would work with a handful of different students, and my co-teacher would put up slides and they'd have a few bullets on them, right? Even when he wouldn't overload them and he'd do it properly, he'd have, his heading and then 3 or 4 bullets, keeping it simple, and would ask, and students were taking notes. And this is, I had some students with heavy literacy issues, and this was a high school class. And he would ask, raise your hand, who's ready to go on, who needs more time to copy these. And if you're a student that isn't that confident with your literacy, you don't want to call yourself out in high school like, oh, I haven't copied these down yet. But the working memory issue with one of the students that I have that was found out to have language-based disabilities and dyslexia would look at the board, would see say it was just cat, C, A, have to write C, sometimes even look up again to see A, then the T, because even just holding what they're seeing on the board down to get to their paper was a struggle. So it's that holding in the working memory that was a huge issue. But I will get back accurately and follow up with the correct parts of the brain. One of the other, yeah, and thanks for your question. One of the things that I found fascinating, even before this work, was historically they always would say your IQ you're born with, But literacy is the one thing that can actually grow your brain power and your IQ. And we think about decoding and reading. We as adults that are readers can instantly look at a sign while we're driving that can have a decent amount of information about a movie or a product or something. While we're driving, we're looking up and immediately looking at those squiggles, giving them meaning, giving them context, and sometimes even feelings behind it instantaneously. So your brain is doing all of these things. And so when you hold your IQ, your IQ, they always used to think it was a certain level, but the more you read and learn and read complex words and learn new words and read more sophisticated texts and push yourself, you can actually grow your IQ, which is fascinating. And they did that through brain mapping and research. So lots of cool stuff with the brain and literacy.
That it is. Thank you so much.
Of course. Jacqueline's answered. Anything else? I will say the only, wondering the programs. Yes, thanks, Tassia. So, and I should shut up and let you answer that if you'd like, or let you ask.
All right, I enabled Ms. Warren to ask her question.
Hi, Professor Blough. So this question is really stemming from like me just being an interventionist at my school. And I feel like a lot of parents really want a lot of at-home resources to help support their student gains, but that also feel manageable from a parent's perspective. So I'm wondering like how you and your teachers have, if any, have like, gathered up resources to help parents really practice the skills that you guys are teaching in that targeted instruction.
Awesome question. And yes, so I feel like with this program, and our families can feel successful also because of how small each lesson is, because it's focused on letter sounds and about context. Where families struggle. We all learned math differently than they teach it now. And if you're from different countries, you definitely learn math differently even than I did, before it was changed. And so we're all learning math differently. So that can be kind of a disconnect. But with literacy, what we're finding with these resources that come with the program, if we're sending them home to our families with students within the program, even our language learning families, this is helpful to them because it's really breaking down the rules, the phonemes, and the just different parts of the English language and what we do and how it works and the sounds. And so that's been helpful. What I think would be the next step is to record a lot of the work and have the families see and hear how we're breaking it down with video resources next. But great question. And yes, these are really easily transferable things to send home so far.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Of course. I will say this, the only other thing that I was really going to share, and there was a slide of it and talk through it, is this is hard brain work for the kids. It can feel like, you're a second or third grader, and when you walk in, they're still doing letter sounds and like really physically writing them and sounding them out. But this is what they need, but it's hard mental work. So we really try to pair that with the experiences of the school that we're trying to give everybody, that the kids love. We have drones programs. The kids are cooking and growing foods and doing really like hands-on physical and thinking activities and trying to make school different. And so the students in this group really seem to be thriving in those classes too. And I think it's got to be both. You have to really work on what you're working on, but we can't lose sight of the fact that education needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging, and kids need to be problem solving together. So even as they're deeply, embedded into their day here, working on letter sounds and getting to the next steps with that, in the other subject areas, we're really pushing them to just be innovators. Just because they're just learning how to crack the code with reading does not mean that they can't solve, you know, a scientific problem or fly a drone well or anything else. It's just this one code, this one puzzle that they're trying to still solve.
I actually have a question for you, Principal Blough. As you know, the Metropolitan College of New York has a distinctive model of education, and for the benefit of our guests, could you comment about how that model of education and how the college's MS in Education program prepared you for your current role and this particular work? And I apologize for my aging cat in the background.
No problem. Absolutely. You know, I was, I taught a little bit on uncertified, you know, in different areas in charter schools in Ohio, and I got to the city and I saw one of our ads on a subway, and I was like, well, this is accelerated. This is exactly what I need. And I researched multiple programs, and one of the reasons that MCNY stuck was the fact that it's more practical. It's not that we didn't dive into theory, but it was learning. And one of the things I like to really connect with the students, I try to give them something every session, every class that they'll use they can use the next day in their classrooms. It was the practical, like really on the ground learning and training. And it is hard at times because it's accelerated, but we were working immediately. We were in rooms, we were learning on the ground, and before you know it, and I'm fortunate where I'm one of the first classes that students have, and then I'm one of the last classes that students have. And I tell them every time on, you know, my classroom management class, I said, it'll feel like 5 minutes and I'll be telling you, I told you so. I told you this program would go very, very fast. And it does. It's quick and meaningful, but that's why we stay in touch. One of the most powerful things for me, and that what I think the groups now, and we have some fantastic cohorts happening right now, but it is a cohort model. That was the other thing that was really powerful to me. You rely on your peers, and your peers rely on you, and you push each other through because it's quick and because it's accelerated and because the workload at times, like every other master's program, at times it's a lot, and you can work a long day and be a parent, but it's still possible. And it's possible because of that cohort model. You can really push to keep each other in check and to check in on each other and to pull each other through. At my previous school as principal, I hired a teacher, and it was somebody that I graduated the program with, and it was powerful. I still keep in touch with people that I graduated the program with, and we still give each other recommendations of jobs and all kinds of things like that. And so I always really preach to the groups that, listen, you need a common, you know, WhatsApp thread or text thread or something to keep an eye on each other and to pull each other through. And I said, once you graduate, don't delete that, because you're going to want to keep each other's contacts, and one of you is going to be a superintendent someday and have an opening, or one of you is going to need a co-teacher and think of the other one. But the cohort model is very, very powerful.
Thanks very much. And I see that Bashek Grimes has their hand raised, so I'll call on them to raise their question.
Good evening, Professor Blough.
Hey.
Are there supports available for twice exceptional students who may show an accelerated growth level in one area and may need additional support in another area?
So in context of the dyslexia program, if they're excelling in another area, do I have your question right?
In reading, for example, if they're good at mnemonics, they can have good recall on the letters, but they need additional supports in another area of requiring to learn how to read. Are there supports available for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I know you, so I know what we've covered. And if you recall the simple view reading piece that we covered. So
Yes.
what we'll want to do, and I can share resources with you, is you want to think about if it's a fluency issue or say a comprehension issue or a context issue, and just isolate that.
Yes, Dad.
Students can be
Okay.
just incredible readers and incredibly fluent, but have no idea what they're reading. Which then, you would want to just focus on comprehension and vice versa. But I'll make sure I show a couple resources that I like to use with that. But it's definitely more common than you think. And it tricks you, as a teacher, you'll have a student that when you call on them to read, they read very, very fluent. They can read fast. They don't trip up on words because they've cracked the code on the outside, but they have no idea what they're reading. And part of that is they're really using, because some of the different neurological things and the deficits, they're really using all their brain power for cracking the code, and they don't have that working memory piece to be able to do both, to be able to also put it in context and comprehend what they're reading. But there is a lot of resources around for that too. Hopefully that answers your question. Now you know how to get a hold of me. Right. Is there anything else?
I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to add Dr. Ianello to the spotlight so that you can share the screen. And if you'd like to raise any questions to Principal Blough, Dr. Ianello, or any final remarks.
Principal Blough, Professor Blough also, are there benefits for any of our student teachers that you're at your school? Are they getting some kind of exposure to this? And of course, I know you will be informing our students who are in the courses about ongoingly what's happening with this program. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so future implications, definitely. So for especially the diagnostics of literacy course, as pieces of this pilot and program are deemed like, hey, yes, this is working, this piece is successful, data showing this. Even some of the things I know are just good practice. We've already started to use in that course. And then in the future, it'll just be something that I'd love to just bake into the term as far as a diagnostics course. As far as embedded, currently, as much as I share with the students what we're learning and what we're doing. And at the end of each term, I always give them kind of a Google Drive folder with probably too much information in it. But I always hope that somewhere down the line they'll use everything in it, or at least a lot of it. But the student teachers should have more access to that room, I'm hoping, next term. They really kept it kind of locked down during the fall, and rightfully so. There was reporters in and out and a lot of disruptions, but before the year's out, absolutely. They'll be able to. And they're also, which is really awesome, we're putting in a UFT teacher center that will have a lot of literacy resources. And then the teachers want to open it up and do panels with the whole staff, and then offer professional developments for the teachers too, that I will definitely have any student teachers here take. That's great.
Thank you. My second question is your doctorate at Fordham. Are you doing research particularly for your doctorate, your dissertation on this program? Is that how it's related to it?
Yep. So I've gone through a handful of different dissertation topics, as a lot of people have, and the best dissertation is a done dissertation, as I know. And so education takes me on. I love learning about learning and everything about education. And so once this pilot landed here, I wanted to go ahead first into it. And I just knew that this had to be where I changed my research to. And one of the things that fascinates me the most is the social emotional component and change in the students. and also how to set up something that works so well in a private setting with affluent families in a neighborhood with high need, and how to make it work, and some of those components that are needed to make it successful here. Because to me, that's practically important. And if I'm going to do, research, I want it to impact someone. So that's the pieces that I'm looking at right now. But it'll encompass everything with dyslexia. So I'll be able to more accurately answer Heidi's question as far as some of the neurological things, because it's just fascinating.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Are there any other questions? David? Or anyone else who would like to speak?
I do not see any other questions in the chat, nor do I see, let me just double check. Nor do I see any other raised hands.
Okay, then. So I just will say in conclusion, thank you so much, Principal Blough, for this presentation. It is so important, this nexus with MCNY and your school and the Department of Education with this. We're very proud of you, really, as a product of this program, and continue to be supportive by being one of our cooperating principals in this sense. And so want to thank you so much for this, and perhaps in the future, we'll have a follow-up to this as you gather more information, data on this. I think it's a topic that we should continue to address on a broader scale to the MCNY community in this way. Thank you so much, Professor Blough. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. I'm really proud to be a graduate of the program and to still be a part of it. And there's so much noise about the program because cities across the country are looking at this and saying, if we can address this in our country's largest school district and make it work, the implications can be everywhere. So I would definitely be happy to, at the very least, follow up at the end of the year to look at data and see what worked and what doesn't. So thank you.
Thank you. And so in conclusion, I just wanted to thank everyone involved in the preparation for this webinar, special webinar. And I want to thank all of you for attending and participating in it also. And I wish you all a very good evening. Take care.